It worked for Saddam Hussein. It worked for Fidel Castro. This is what despots do. They get people that are loyal to them, that will report back to them. Now, why is it happening? Like I said, it all rolls back. It all goes back to Ferguson. Back in Ferguson, when Michael Brown, large thug, he just robbed a cigar shop. Robbed might be the wrong word. He stole from him, pushed the owner aside as he took his stolen merchandise. Police officer sees him crossing the street, looks suspicious, calls him over. The thug opens the police officer's door, leans in, starts punching the police officer. He starts grabbing at the police officer's gun. The gun goes off, and I'm going to say that neutrally because I don't believe the police officer was trying to shoot him at this point. But the gun went off. I don't recall. I read the report, and I knew what it was at one time, but it's been a while. The thug gets out of the car. They're outstanding on the side. The police officer pulls his gun as the thug raises his arms. No, that's wrong as well. He didn't raise his arms. That was a claim made by the defense. As the thug is charging at him, and he pulls the trigger and shoots Michael Brown. Now, everything that the police officer said was upheld by the evidence, regardless of what several of the people on the street had said. Many of them recanted when the evidence was presented to them. Michael Brown was not an innocent bystander. Michael Brown was not surrendering. Michael Brown was a thug. Michael Brown was grabbing for the gun in the car. All of this was proven. The district attorney turned the case over to a grand jury to decide. He did not want to make the call to not press charges. He wanted it to be the public, which I think was a wise thing to do. Grand jury listened to all the evidence, weighed the evidence, and declared the shooting was justified. Next thing you know, we have rioting in the streets. We have Eric Holder flying in. We have Al Sharpton flying in. We have Jesse Jackson flying in. Eric Holder is standing on the streets and says, "While I support law enforcement, I'm also a black man, and I understand what it's like to be black in America." In other words, well, I understand the police because I'm the top cop in the country, but I support the blacks. Al Sharpton called for charges to be filed anyway. Forget what the facts say. He wants charges filed against the police officer, even though the jury found him innocent. Eric Holder declares he's not going to accept the jury's ruling. He's going to open up a federal investigation. He wants control. He wants to retrain the police. Obama set aside some money for retraining police officers. The money will be paid probably to Acorn or one of Obama's supporters to retrain police officers which behaved in perfect manner. They're basically declaring, even though the jury found the police officer to be innocent, the victim was black, so we're going to declare the victim was shot, even though he was innocent. Now, while all these race baiters and troublemakers have got their message out loud and clear, what people of America don't seem to know, because the media hasn't covered it, I covered it when it happened. But now that we've got 2 more police officers shot in Ferguson this last week, I want to revisit this column. The column was posted on TomO'Halloran.com back in November, late November. The article, if you want to get it and read it, go to TomO'Halloran.com. The column is called Movers and Shakers Behind the Ferguson Riots. It was written by a very well-written, well-researched column by Teresa Monroe Hamilton. The people on the ground in Ferguson are as much a part of the problem, if not more so. I'd say much more so than what happened between the police officer and even the thug who got his just desserts that night. The people on the ground in Ferguson look like a Star Wars scene, a Star Wars bar scene. Talk about a bunch of misfits and anarchists. Let's start with Lisa Fithian. Lisa joined the labor movement through the AFL-CIO Organizing Institute in 1993. She's considered a legendary organizer. She also served as a human shield in actions conducted by the United International Solidarity Movement in the Pakistan cities of Jenin and Nablus. And she's accused Israel of slaughtering Palestinians every single day in Gaza. She's known for her statement, "Create a crisis," because crisis is the edge where change is possible. And if that sounds familiar, it should. It's right out of Holder and Obama's playbook, as well as Marxism in general. Fithian was a lead organizer in the infamous Seattle riots back in '99 that devolved into violence. She's also known for her teaching of tactics, violent tactics, and community organizing. She specializes in aggressive direct action tactics. She's provided training and support for ACORN, for the National People's Action, which is the new version of the Students for Democratic Society, and for other national organizations. She trained somewhere around 600 protesters in Ferguson alone. Training protesters. Why do protesters need training? Shouldn't they just stand out on streets saying, "We disagree"? No, they're taught to get in police officers' faces, to push for trouble. They're taught to look and see when police are and where they're not. How to throw fire bombs and set buildings on fire. How to spit on our police officers. And she's far from alone in her revolution organizing. She was joined on the ground by the likes of Code Pink, Revcom, the New Black Panthers, the Socialist Party USA. The ACLU had been in the mix from the beginning as well, along with the SEIU. The United Nations became involved, along with the national LGBT organizations, climate environmentalists, amnesty groups, pro-Palestinian organizations, Christian socialist, social justice groups. These aren't really Christians. These are like Obama's church. Give all the black people reparations because their great-grandfathers were brought over and sold as slaves. Sure, but they were brought over by blacks and sold by blacks. And it was hundreds of years ago. Amnesty International had a 13-person human rights delegation on the ground looking for human rights abuses. Many other groups joined in, such as the Tawhid Youth Development Life, Organization for Black Struggle, the Moorish Science Temple, the Coalition Against Police Crimes, the Universal African People's Organization. And no radical party would ever be complete without the Socialist Workers' Party. The pro-Palestinian people that were on the ground in Ferguson. Are you beginning to see the cause of the problems in Ferguson? the cause of the unrest, with all these people trying to stir up trouble, to agitate. No wonder guns had gone off in the dark. These people are standing around chanting and flaming throwing gasoline on the flames, basically. The pro-Palestinian groups that were on the ground were the St. Louis Palestine Solidarity Committee, the Organization for Black Struggle, the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, Muslims for Ferguson, the U.S. Campaign to End Israeli Occupation. What the hell are they doing in Ferguson? It's called destabilization. The St. Louis Palestinian BDS National Committee, the National Students for Justice in Palestine, Palestinian Youth Movement, the American Muslims for Palestine, African Americans for Justice. There was a great presence by the Nation of Islam as well, and the New Black Panthers. CARE was there, the Council of Arab Islamic Relations, as well as a whole host of jihadists, including ISIS, who is there recruiting. This is why we had problems in Ferguson. This is why we still have problems in Ferguson. And then there were the race hustlers, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. And then Governor Nixon and Valerie Jarrett. Governor Nixon loudly and publicly proclaimed there was no government influence on the National Guard not showing up on the first night of the riots as businesses burned and were looted. Police cars were rocked and set on fire. Nixon let the city burn as directed by Valerie Jarrett and the Obama administration. It's acknowledged by the White House that Valerie Jarrett and Nixon were in close contact for the first 24 hours. It's hard not to see who called the shots. That is why we had problems. And what is the outcome of the problems? The White House had their finger on the pulse. They knew all of these groups. These groups are all supporters of the Obama administration. Every single group I called out was an anti-American group. Every one of them hates freedom and liberty. They hate the United States of America. Every single group I called out. And they all supported Obama. And what is the outcome of all that? The outcome is Obama is now taking control of 6 large city police departments across the United States. That is the outcome that they were shooting for. But Obama's got a recovery going on, right? Yeah? Do you really think so? Do you really believe the numbers that they read off? Andy Hoffman from the MilesFranklin.com financial analyst. He said that the Greek meltdown, the meltdown in Greece, could be just a couple of weeks away. The Greek bailout was done for the French and the German governments, not for the Greeks. They have no way of making the payments back, and it's expected that within weeks now, Greece will melt down and probably drop out of the EU, if not get kicked out. Andy Hoffman says an historic economic collapse is imminent. Obama is reporting that the unemployment is down to 5%. Meanwhile, it's widely known to anybody that doesn't listen to the 6 o'clock news, anybody that tunes into the internet news, that reads the blogs, the real unemployment, when you count the people that have stopped looking for work, the real unemployment is 18 to 22%. Target is laying off 1,700 within the next couple of weeks. They're not hiring